My husband told me to pay off the $200,000 mortgage alone.
I have to send money to my parents, and considering how much they need, paying off the mortgage will make things really difficult for all of us.
Yeah, it really will be difficult for all of us, including your girlfriend, who's siphoning so frickin' much you don't even know what the value of money is anymore. Damn you. My husband's face instantly turned deathly pale, and his breathing became heavy. My name is Linda, and I'm a 32-year-old office woman. My parents passed away early in life, and for this tragic reason, I had to become completely independent financially since I was a college student. Thanks to that, my biggest strength nowadays is the will and the ability to economize. And my hobby, saving money. Such is me, and I've always been confident in my money management skills, and yet someone's managed to cheat me out of so much of my savings. What's more, the person who did this heinous act was the person who I trusted the most. 2 years ago, I had saved $100,000, which was my savings goal, and I was finally able to manage a few apartments, which had been my dream for so long, and which I'd been planning for some time since my goal was drawing near. I was worried that my current office job wouldn't be enough money to send me to a good retirement. So I wanted to own some pieces of property that would be available for rent, while women of my age are working hard on finding that right someone with whom to spend the rest of their lives, and their weddings. I was eager to secure enough money to have more than enough to live decently while not working. That's why I never had any experience with men. I've never been with a man, and I've never been in love with anyone. For me, saving up for a brighter future was more valuable to me than love. But then, everything changed when I met the man of my dreams. That man was Steven, who was my husband once upon a time. He is 5 years older than me, and a wonderful man with such a pure, pleasant smile. I met him at a major real estate when I was looking for a place to buy once I became a full-time employee and saved up enough to start investing in property. He was the clerk who helped me find a good place.
So, you're thinking of buying an apartment to rent out to someone? You're so young, ma'am, and yet seem to know exactly what you're doing.
I've only had to put the pieces together and do what I knew I should to help me in the future. He was so kind to me and listened to what my lonely self wanted to say, and before I knew it, I fell in love with him. Steven had healed my lonely heart and given it something it had craved for so long: companionship.
After this, if you have time, may I ask you out to dinner together, ma'am?
But I've never been out to dinner before. I don't want you to go to any trouble.
I guess so. How about we get takeout, eat in the park?
By all means, that's a great idea. He showed me signs that he was interested in me as well. We started spending more and more time together.
With you, I feel like I can be my natural self. I want to be with you forever.
I want to be with you too, Steven. He eventually proposed to me, which I accepted, and soon thereafter, I married him. Thanks to him, my plans to spend my entire life, my retired life included, alone had completely changed. I was now making plans for a future together. We started looking for a new house. The main reason was because he was living at his parents' home, and I was living in my office's woman's dormitory.
I know it's your life savings, but I think we should use the $100,000 you saved up as the purchase funds for the house, and then we can work together to pay off the loan.
I think that's the best thing to do, honestly. That would take a lot off our plate, and our financial burdens over the course of the years will be a lot less.
We're going to use your savings, which I think is a huge blessing, so I'm going to take care of you for the rest of your life.
I thought I would be on my own for the rest of my life. To know that I could depend on someone else to live at least a good life, as I'd planned, made me feel happy. I went from managing apartments in solitude to buying a home for my husband and I. The cost of the home was $200,000. From my savings, we made a down payment of $100,000. We decided the house would be purchased under my name, and that the rest of the loan would be spent 50-50 between the wife and the husband. The monthly payment of $600 to pay off the loan became $300 each for me and for Stephen, and we eventually moved into the home of our dreams. However, as the date of the first payment of $600 approached, my husband told me he couldn't afford it anymore. I don't understand. This is not what we decided.
I'm sorry, but it's my parents. They asked me if I could give them a little more, just for 6 months.
My parent-in-laws took great care of us at the time of our wedding and when we moved up into our new house. My father-in-law, Mr. Knox, the head of a karate dojo, and teaches to the children of the community social etiquette and courtesy through martial art classes. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Knox, owns a craft store where she also offered knitting classes. I thought they were very independent and respectable. That's why I was so surprised. I didn't realize that they also relied on their son to send them some financial support. 6 months, right? All right, I understand. They'll be okay in 6 months, right?
Yeah, they'll be fine. Once the family budget settles down to something more comfortable, I'll pay my share.
I couldn't hold Stephen responsible for his parents' financial situation. It wasn't his fault in any way. And it's only natural a son or a daughter would help their parents out, should they need to. But a part of me was still unhappy with the situation. And the fact that the only option was to take on the mortgage payments myself frustrated me, to be honest. However, based on the nature of my personality, I couldn't let this little occurrence go by without doing something about it officially. If my husband were to dodge the rest of the mortgage and come up with excuses to not pay his fair share of the deal, I was certain that that would create a rift in our marriage. We may be husband and wife, but a verbal promise to each other simply isn't enough for me. I'll make sure that we have an official agreement, and I want you to sign a contract that binds us to this deal, okay? I wanted Stephen to reevaluate his qualities and make efforts to save money. That way, he should be able to make his own payments without fail. I also made him promise me that his parents would work hard to try and stabilize the family budget. In the event that even after 6 months, if my husband still couldn't pay his share of the sum, his parent-in-laws would pay the whole he owes in a large sum. This is what I asked to be written down in a contract. In the contract was an undeniable record that he explained my conditions to his parents, and as proof that they understood and accepted the terms and conditions, I had my parent-in-laws write their signatures and stamp the paper with their fingerprints.
Hang on, Linda. Don't you think you're being a bit paranoid? I promised you I'd pay back in 6 months.
This isn't about you, Stephen. Your parents need to restabilize the family budget. Otherwise, the promise you're going to make will not be kept, and I wouldn't be surprised if it never was paid back.
I know, but...
My husband started to complain about my financial personality, but the fact I've been able to save up so much at my age should be more than enough to tell anyone that I'm very particular about how money is spent. The contract, with all my terms and conditions and the deadline for the payback, became important because I wanted Stephen to have a sense of urgency in managing his own finances. From then on, I continued to pay the mortgage for both of us. I ordered to raise my salary, I worked overtime to make ends meet, and I always came home late. That's when I noticed that my husband's life began to change in the strangest of ways. No matter how late I came home, I never failed to cook for myself, and I also did the laundry. But perhaps Stephen was eating out all the time. There was no sign of him ever eating anything at home, let alone cooking anything. What was more, his laundry began to smell like a sweet perfume. I sensed a woman's presence in the shadow of my husband, and I started to suspect he was having an affair. You know, you've been away a lot lately. Sometimes you don't even come home. I know this is going to sound crazy, but you're not, having an affair, are you?
No, of course not. You've always been the only woman for me, Linda. I'm also just trying to do my job to take some of the burden off your shoulders. I go to cabarets because some of my clients do work in those, but I only ever go once in a blue moon.
That's what he told me, but something just didn't seem right. And then 6 months came and went. I tried to get him to pay his share of the mortgage. Why wasn't I surprised he wanted me to extend the deadline by another 6 months? Are you kidding me? No, you promised. And we had a contract.
I saved my money just like I said I would, but I still have to send some to my parents. There's nothing I can really do about it. I don't have a choice.
Well then, I'll talk to your parents. I'll explain to them that they'll have to manage on their own now.
No. You wouldn't understand a child's desire to help his or her parents out. I know they feel so sorry about this situation. You don't want to tell them anything, you'll only hurt their feelings.
As we were arguing, the doorbell rang. Speak of the devils themselves. My parent-in-laws were at the door.
What's going on here? We can hear your loud voices from even outside the house.
Oh my God, Linda, my darling. You're crying. What's wrong? Listen to me, Mrs. Knox.
Linda, you shut up and let me handle this. It's nothing, guys. We had a fight is all. We have a few things to talk about right now. That's why you have to go home today.
Stephen frantically rushed to turn his parents away from the house, but being the wise, kind people they are, both of my parent-in-law saw something wrong with us. Instead of leaving immediately, they climbed into the house and went into the living room straight away.
Come here and sit down, both of you. Stephen, my boy, what was all that about you sending money to your parents? Seems to me that whatever it was you were fighting about had something to do with us.
I think so too. I heard the words parents loud and clear, and we became worried we were causing something bad between you two. We were just on our way home from shopping, and we thought we would pay you a visit. But then we noticed Linda acting strange, and I don't think we feel inclined to leave until we understand the real reason why you two were fighting. My husband turned into all colors of the rainbow, from blue to red to green to white. He stayed white for quite a while, obviously, a sign that he was panicking about something. He was definitely not behaving properly. At the insistence of my parent-in-laws, I told them that because of my husband's reminiscence to them, I was the only one who was paying the mortgage. When they listened to everything I had to say, Mr. Knox turned to his son and said,
What does your wife mean when she says you were sending us money? When did you ever do that?
Honey, why are you being such a jerk? You were having a hard time getting your mortgage payments up front, and when you came to us for some help, we gave it to you. Wait, hold on. Stephen, you were getting money from your parents? It came to my attention that not only was my husband not sending his parents any money, but he was receiving money from them so he could quote-unquote pay the mortgage. All eyes turned to my husband, who looked like he was about to shit himself.
No, this is... well...
Stephen was visibly and audibly disturbed. His voice sounded like a bicycle chain that hadn't been oiled in 5 years. In the middle of all this, his cell phone, which he'd left on the table in front of us, rang. Someone was calling him. I saw his face tense up, and I knew it was time I questioned him about all the doubts I had about his infidelity. Are you sure you're not having an affair? Who's on the other end of this phone call?
Don't be frickin' ridiculous. That's just a coworker of mine.
He reached for his cell phone on the table, but Mr. Knox caught my husband's hand.
Now wait just a minute, boy. So it's really not a woman, is it? That's a man that's calling you. 100%.
My father-in-law held a firm grip on Stephen's wrist, and since he is a martial arts sensei, Stephen couldn't break free all that easily. My husband turned, even paler than I thought was humanly possible. At this point, he looked like a fully sentient snowman. On the screen of this ringing cell phone was the name Dear Gina. Dear Gina?
Now that's suspicious. Winnie dear, put that phone on speaker, if you please.
Your wish is my command, my lord. Mr. Knox, who noticed something amiss with his son, as though he was hiding something important, instructed his wife to answer the phone and put it on speaker. And then things escalated quickly from there. Immediately after Mrs. Knox did what her husband asked her to do, the suspected woman whose name was Gina, the same woman whom my husband was having an affair with, cheerfully blared her voice. Finally, I get a hold of you. Where are you right now? What are you doing?
I'm just at home, Miss Fine. How do you do on this fine day?
What's with that tone of voice, darling? I know you're joking, like you always do when we're together. But this one's just creepy. So, you're home right now, which obviously means that fat bitch of a wife of yours is nearby, huh? You're such a naughty man, Stephen, darling. But that's what I like about you. Gets my motor running. Leave that hag alone, and come over and see me this minute, Mr. Cutie Pie.
Yeah. Yes.
So from what I could understand, this obvious bitch by the name of Gina Vine thought that I, her lover's wife, was in the next room, which was why he was giving these one-worded, polite responses. Perhaps that made her even more excited, because what came next made her sound even more provocative in her speech. Perhaps provocative is too mild a word. I'm positive horny is a more exact match. Hey, don't you want me? I want you to make passionate love to me, just like you did last night. My mother-in-law couldn't take it anymore and snatched my husband's phone away from him. You little parasite, you knew he was married, and yet you were willing to do the unspeakable with him? Don't you feel any shame? Who the hell are you? Stephen, darling, what's going on over there? My mother-in-law never answered either of those questions and immediately hung up the phone. She then proceeded to stare at her son.
No, it's not what you think. It's just some girl I met when my colleagues grabbed my ass to a cabaret. It's not like I'm cheating on Linda or anything, honest.
After all this time, and even during this moment of complete hopelessness, I couldn't help but slap my husband for making such a stupid excuse. You're such an asshole! That you were sending money to your parents? That the money became even more demanding? It was all a lie! The truth was that it was just hard work for you to waste your gold coins for another bitch. I'd never gotten angry in front of my husband before, and in that moment, I was beyond angry. I was downright furious. Stephen looked like a skeleton by that point. His skin the color of the Walking Dead, his eyes ready to pop out of their sockets, his limbs and his lips trembling. And what about the contract? Was it really signed by your parents? You lied to me!
No, that was,
Linda, dear, what do you mean by contract? I had Stephen sign a contract of my own concoction, Mrs. Knox. The contents of this contract consisted of the pledge that he would repay me his half of the mortgage in a lump sum when 6 months passed. In the event he couldn't pay it, the contract also stated that I would personally ask my parent-in-laws to pay it. I was under the impression that Stephen had told you everything about it, and that you agreed to the terms and conditions, signed, and stamped your fingerprints. I was sure you did everything. I showed them the agreement. They both agreed that the fingerprints on the document were indeed matched to their actual fingerprints, and they were shocked. Mr. Knox went on to interrogate Stephen. The fact that his voice was ridiculously quiet made it so unsettling.
What's the meaning of all this, son? I never heard any of this stuff from you, and yet our actual fingerprints are on this contract.
My speechless, hesitating husband finally decided to open his mouth.
All this time I was going to make Linda pay the mortgage in full, so I signed it myself, and I got your fingerprints whilst you were sleeping. Wasn't easy too, but the fact you guys are heavy sleepers helped me a bunch. So that's why my finger was red when I woke up a few months back. What the hell were you thinking?
And then, I heard a powerful slap on my husband's cheek that sent echoes across the living room. It was much more forceful than my own slap. The sound was so raw the sheer force of the slap could have knocked out John Cena. It was from my mother-in-law. You're absolutely pathetic. Oh, my dear Linda, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My mother-in-law was crying and was apologizing to me in such a heart-wrenching way. I felt tears welling up in my own eyes, too. The money my son was supposed to pay, we'll pay it in full. Oh, Mrs. Knox. My in-laws were fooled just as badly as I was, if not more. I felt so sorry for them.
Linda, what my son did is beyond anything forgivable. Mark my words, I'll make him pay for his ridiculous mistakes.
And then, he turned to the now sobbing Stephen and said,
Now, Stephen, You're really lucky. I'm a martial arts master, and for that very reason, I'm not going to beat you like your mother did. But from now on, I'm going to take you to the family dojo, and I'm going to give you lessons you'll never, ever forget.
And that's how my husband was dragged by his father back to his parents' home. I later demanded alimony from him and from the woman whom he'd been having an affair with. The identity of this woman was quickly ascertained when Mr. Knox further investigated Stephen. Gina Vine, aka Dear Gina, was a female employee who worked at the same company as my husband. That day, Stephen had a very hard training session, some lessons he'd never, ever forget, at the dojo. And from what I heard from Mr. Knox himself, he couldn't recover until after a few days. I finished the paperwork to sell the property soon thereafter, and told Stephen to hurry up and move his stuff out of the house. He didn't think I'd go that far, and he was terribly shocked.
You sold the house? Oh my god, there's no freaking way! Now where am I gonna go back to?
What made you think you were ever going back to that house? We're getting a divorce now, so if you want to say something to me, you'll have to go through my lawyer. Don't ever contact me again. That's all I did, and then I cut all ties with my husband. My parent-in-laws personally promised me that they would take responsibility for being so soft on him before, and that they were going to make Stephen himself pay all alimony he owed me. After the alimony was paid off, the plan was that they were going to kick him out of their house. In the meantime, Stephen had to go to his father's dojo and receive a special martial arts course to reestablish a basic sense of integrity. The hard training he endures every day will surely make him understand the severity of his crimes, and hopefully, it will give him a better heart. As for the sale of the house, although he didn't get all the money back, we did sell for $150,000, and I used a big portion of the money to pay off the remaining $100,000 in mortgage. The remaining $50,000 was my ex-husband's responsibility to pay, but my parent-in-laws took that over and paid it for me. In the end, there was no gain or loss in my savings, and I was satisfied. And my life was back to square one. Betrayed by a man I trusted left me depressed and broken at first. But then, I thought about it more and more rationally, and then I realized I'm also not a good judge of men. I could have noticed Stephen's ill intentions long before the situation escalated to the scale it did. And I became convinced I was the main cause why this ever happened in the first place. I don't think I'll have to get married for a while, but I also realized that I need to gain some experience in love. For now, though, I'm going to focus all my energy on my job, which is going pretty well, by the way, and I'm going to work hard, keep moving forward in life, and live the best one I could ever ask for. Wish me luck.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. specifying the brand of wine they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.